Welcome to all tuning into this broadcast. In these difficult times, we urge you all to stay home and stay safe. We are doing this series of programs because we think that this is able to help us in lifting the spirit of everyone in this time of uncertainty. If you have any questions to ask, please type them in Q&A below, not in the chat.
Okay, tonight, GPO are very indeed honored to be able to invite Mr. Lu Bang Hean as our guest for tonight. The main topic of today's broadcast is about playing with others, performing in chamber music and concertos. Here is a brief background about Mr. Lu. Born in Ipoh, Malaysia, he was the winner of the first national Mozart piano competition in 1987. Following his studies at the Royal College of Music, London, with a scholarship by ABRSM and receiving many awards, he did his postgraduate studies in Milan, Italy.
Currently residing in Malaysia, he also performed in many other countries and is an educator, lecturing at the Institute of Music, UCSI University, and has been involved in various seminars, workshops, and masterclasses in many countries. He is also a regular performer and also featured in many Malaysian Philharmonic Orchestra concerts and collaborated with various instrumentalists and vocalists. He is one of the founding members of the Sutra Ensemble, whose aims to bring chamber music to a wider audience.
And with that, let's return to the main topic, playing with others, performing in chamber music and concertos. Let's start with your beginnings, Mr. Lu. Who or what incident inspired you to learn the piano and to embark on this illustrious journey of yours?
Hello, thank you for having me on. Good evening to everybody. Well, I suppose at that time when I started piano, it wasn't quite as fashionable for boys to learn music. It was a lot of girls learned piano and so on. And so I had two sisters, and they actually started learning, and so I was the younger one, so I picked it up. I started kind of bashing on the piano, so my mother thought I'd better send him to proper lessons. And yeah, that was how it got started, really, when I was about, I think, 6. I mean, for that time, it was fairly young, although nowadays people start learning when they're about 4, sometimes even 3 years old.
I see. Well, the next question, and about those photos of you, when was your first experience of playing a concerto with an orchestra?
Okay, I think, let me think, when I was 17. When I was 16, I went over to Penang to compete in a competition. I think it was the first Mozart competition there, sort of national Mozart competition. So I won the prize, and the next year I was invited to perform a concerto with the Penang Symphony Orchestra. So that was actually the first time I played it. Yes, when I was 17. Wow. Yeah, and I mean, at that time, we were not as lucky as kids now. So I was born in Ipoh, so I was living in Ipoh then. There are no orchestras there. And so I actually didn't have a chance to listen to a live orchestra. In fact, I think, if I remember correctly, the first time I actually hear a proper symphony orchestra live was when actually I played the concerto with them. Concerto. Yeah, before that it was just, you know, videos or cassettes, if anybody remember those.
Okay, next question. With what chamber music is? Some of the audience, including myself, are not that experienced in performing music. Please give us your take on what chamber music means to you.
Well, chamber music is a sort of collaboration. So it's playing with another instrumentalist. It can be a violin, a cello, a flute, clarinet, or even a trumpet. So it's basically working with others. That's why I called it playing with others. So a lot of people learning the piano tend to focus a lot on solo work. So even even before I went overseas, a lot of it was just focused on learning solo repertoire and so on. I hardly ever played with anybody else, but it was after I went overseas to England to study that I started working quite a lot with other instrumentalists, and I found that I enjoyed it very much, this sort of collaboration. And well, I suppose the typical sort of Asian kid, where you go for lessons and you just wait for what the teacher tell you to do. So it's basically just kind of sitting there and waiting for the teacher to tell you about it, rather than you giving inputs into the So it was fairly new then for me when I went overseas and started working with other instrumentalists. So I started learning about, well, how to talk and how to kind of verbalize your musical ideas. So that was a very important learning experience. So basically talking, discussing about music, about interpretation. I mean, not just the basic of, how fast you want this or how loud you want this, but more intricate things and so on. So a lot of that I got from well, playing and performing chamber music with others. Yeah, and that
so
in
it not
turn
only
also
just
helped.
sharpen your sorry.
Yeah, and then I was going to say that in turn actually helped in my
Sorry.
solo playing and also my teaching, because then it's one just learns how to put ideas into words. Because if you just learn, you just play solo works all the time, you don't really have to talk so much to other people about it. So you can just, well, basically do what you want at the piano. But with chamber music, then you need to then have a conversation with your chamber music partners about what you want to do with the music, what you want to portray, what you want to convey, that sort of thing. So yeah, that was a sort of one of the most important thing I got, I think, from playing chamber music.
Oh, so playing chamber music not only sharpen your music skills but also your social skills.
Well, so social skills, as in talking about
learning how to
music and
communicate.
that sort of thing. But yeah, I suppose also social skills, because if anybody who knew me like years ago when I was a kid, they all will say that I'm a really shy and quiet person.
Wow.
Well, I'm slightly less shy now because I've been put into situations where I need to talk to a whole big group of people and so on. So yeah, that helps.
Okay, next question. What are the differences between playing chamber music and concertos?
Okay, well, chamber music, let's say you're doing a piano trio or quartet or whatever, it's a bit like, okay, let's say a piano trio. It's a little bit like a concerto for 3 instruments, where each 3 usually will have very, very important soloistic sort of parts to play. With a concerto, you are, in a sense, kind of working with a whole big orchestra. So the orchestra is one instrument, but it's a lot more large scale in that sense. So you have to consider, the kind of tone you can produce, because it's got to be able to hopefully project over and over the orchestra sometimes. And the person you communicate with in an orchestra doesn't play an instrument in that sense. He is a conductor. So you actually then collaborate with the conductor in that sense, and then the conductor in turn leads the orchestra. So there is a lot of differences, but a lot of concertos are also written in some passages where it plays really very much like chamber music. For example, some concertos by Beethoven or by Schumann, where a lot of the parts you basically are sometimes accompanying a woodwind solo, a clarinet solo, or so on. So there are a lot of very sort of intimate chamber music setting within an orchestra. So definitely with the experience in playing chamber music, that actually helps quite a lot while playing a concerto.
Okay, is there much of a difference playing a concerto with a second piano as accompaniment compared to an orchestra? Yeah.
I suppose in some sense, when you play with the second piano, you don't hear the tone color. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
You also don't communicate with the conductor. You communicate with the second pianist, and because it's another piano, and since I'm a pianist, it's in some sense easier or more intuitive to communicate with another pianist, because you know what sort of gestures the pianist does, how a pianist would play something. Whereas with the orchestra, it's very slightly different. So you actually communicate through the conductor, and in some sense, sometimes the orchestra doesn't react quite as quickly as you're used to with another pianist. So you have to take that into consideration. I mean, before performing a concerto.
And what are the differences?
Yeah, I was going to say, before performing a concerto, definitely I would recommend anybody who wants to play a concerto, to practice with a second piano, to get used to the parts and so on. But when you actually get up there to play with the orchestra for the first time, you will find that it feels different. A lot of things feel different because of the tone color, because of where the orchestra is in relation to where you are sitting. For example, you will hear the first violin, who can be just like 2 feet to your left, very clearly. You might be able to make eye contact with the cellist, who is probably sitting right across. So the whole kind of logistics and dynamics of the stage is quite different.
Okay. Yeah. And what are the differences between playing with winds and strings compared to playing with a voice?
Well, a voice is really, I suppose, very much like any other instrument, except that in the voice, you also have to contend with the text, because they are singing usually with words. So sometimes what you do with the music depends on what the words are, what the singer is trying to express, rather than just the musical terms itself, rather than just the sort of musical phrases. So in some sense, you need to also know what the song is about and so on. A lot of the time, if you work with a singer, they will be singing in a foreign language. You don't have to know every single one of the words, but you should basically know some of the basic meaning of the song and so on. So it's different, because sometimes the music will need to be interpreted in a certain way because of the words, rather than because of the just the music itself. But apart from that, it's still to collaboration. And really, with all this, I think nowadays not so many people use the word accompanist anymore, because an accompanist sounds like somebody is doing a sort of backup to a singer, or to a soloist. But no, nowadays we call it collaborative piano playing, because you are collaborating with other instrumentalists rather than just backing up. So it is, I would say, with 2 or 3 all equal partners. Even if you're playing with a singer, you're still an equal partner with the singer.
Okay, I see. Okay, let's talk about your mentoring and teaching. In addition to equipping your students with techniques, performance skills, what other non-musical attributes are equally as important?
Well, I think nowadays it's not enough to just be a good musician. You still need good social skills. Well, you basically need this sort of good EQ. Basically, you need to be organized. You need to be punctual if you need to show up for rehearsals and so on. You need to be able to deliver what you promise, just like any other work in that sense. So you need sometimes to be a good team player as well. So I don't think gone are the days where you can be a sort of eccentric artist, where everybody will just kind of kowtow to whatever you want. You still need to be a good collaborator in that sense, in the sort of non-musical sense with other people. So hopefully, I mean, these are the things that well, with my student, that it does come across that you need other skills rather than just being able to play the piano well.
Yeah, true. Okay, thank you. And for the next question, how are both chamber music and concertos different from solo repertoire performances?
Well, a little bit like what I was saying. Um, in a lot of sense, when you play a solo piece or when you get up on stage to perform a solo piece, you have that much more flexibility to do what you want. You can be quite spontaneous in terms of how much flexibility, how freely you want to do it. You might feel that moment, okay, I want to do something else, something different. So you can do that. So in some sense, with chamber musicians, with chamber music, and also with our concerto, you can have some spontaneity, but you need to keep within limits. You need to know how the other people can react to it. So if you do something too outlandish, it will kind of upset the apple cart, as it were. So you don't want to kind of derail the performance. But you can have, especially if you've played with a sort of regular group of chamber musicians, like I used to play with Yap Ling in the trio quite a lot. We were called the Malaysian Piano Trio. So when you have a sort of partnership for some time, then you kind of learn about each other's personality, musical personality. So then you can actually inject some sort of spontaneous freedom within certain limits. And also, I mean, nowadays I've got this piano quartet groups, which are ensemble, who I play with regularly. So again, with them, sometimes we do slightly sort of spontaneous stuff, even during a performance, but you know that the other performers can react to it. With a concerto, it's slightly different. Again, you need to again take into consideration whether the conductor knows what you are doing. Then the conductor in turn will have to lead the orchestra. So again, it's a slightly different dynamic.
Oh, I see. Okay, before the last question, I would like to make an announcement. The audience, if you want to ask Mr. Lu any questions, please drop your questions into the Q&A section. Thank you. Okay, last question.
All right. Yeah, I see somebody has submitted a question.
Yeah. Before that, on behalf of JPO, we would like to thank you for your memorable performances with JPO.
Namely, it was my pleasure.
Yeah, Peter and the Wolf, and the concerto for two pianos in C minor, third movement by Bach.
Yeah.
Remember that?
That's right. I remember I wasn't Peter, nor was I the Wolf, but it was a concert called Peter and the Wolf, because I think one half of it featured Peter and the Wolf. The other half was me playing the Chopin concerto, second concerto, with the JPO. That was great. And even earlier on, I did, I think with Yap Ling's wife, Grace, we did a 2-piano and orchestra Bach concerto. So that was, I think, probably the first collaboration with JPO. Yeah, so that was really great. And
can you share your thoughts?
I mean, I've played with various orchestras, JPO, a couple of sort of community orchestras here, as well as some professional orchestras like National Symphony Orchestra, Jesselton Philharmonic Orchestra. So, one thing with professional orchestras like NSO or even like MPO, for example, we have very much less rehearsal times. In fact, if I remember correctly, in the MPO concerto, I basically come in on a Wednesday, have one afternoon's rehearsal, and then the Thursday is another short rehearsal, and that's it. And then it's the concert day. Whereas when I remember working with JPO or other community orchestra, it could be a camp. Then we have quite a few days to kind of rehearse, or it was, I think, some local orchestras here. So I actually went a few times through a few weeks. So in that sense, it's interesting in the sense that I then could see how a lot of these community orchestras, I mean, something like JPO, how they can improve. It's really interesting to see from rehearsal to rehearsal the level of improvement. And then sometimes there are parts then where I might just want to just work with one or two of the players for certain sort of more chamber music like passages. So those are quite great. So in that sense, you don't get quite so much, I suppose, intimacy in a sense with other professional orchestra, where you kind of come in, do your rehearsals, all business like, all under a tight schedule, and then that's it. Then you perform. So it was a really great experience, and great to see that Jesselton, JPO has grown so much and doing so many things, especially the outreach thing and so on.
Actually, I was going to ask you, what do you think about the outreach program?
Oh, I think it's vitally important, and I mean, let's face it, it is expensive to kind of organize up an orchestra. You need the space to organize concerts and all that. So you do really have to rely on a lot of goodwill, a lot of people, a lot of voluntary work, hopefully a lot of or some corporate sponsorship and so on, as part of their CSR maybe, because you do need all this for any community, any kind of, well, I suppose civilization. Really, it is important to have some of the arts, and starting in a little orchestra, school orchestra, whatever, it is a start, and that will lead to other things. You have got to start from all these to pique their interests, and hopefully talents will be discovered, or some of them decided to go further in it. But even if they don't, it is such a big sense of community to make music together. So that's really, really important, I think.
Okay, thank you. Here's a personal question from me. What sets the piano apart from all the other instruments? What makes it so special to you?
Well, first of all, probably the piano, even more than a harp, has the widest range from the lowest note right to the highest note. But in some sense, the piano is a very sort of monochrome color. It's a very sort of black and white. It's like a black and white photo compared to a wind instrument. Even if you think about an oboe or a flute and a clarinet, they need to play one note, and it's just completely different in color. So in some sense, the piano is not quite as colorful, but we do try to create illusions of different colors when we play the piano. And another thing about the piano is that it is a kind of an amalgamation between a string and a percussion instrument. So the strings are being hit. So you can never get a long line like a string player or woodwind player. And you are actually not in contact with the moving parts, in the sense that when you play the violin, you can actually feel the vibration, or when you play a trumpet or you play a clarinet, you actually feel your breath, feel the vibration of your breath. We can't feel the vibration of the strings. We just play the note, and then a hammer strikes the strings. So in some sense, we then need to make more of this connection consciously, much more than a lot of the other instruments. But on the other hand, the piano is wonderful in being able to conjure up illusions or imitation of different instruments, different colors, and so on. So, well, that's good and bad.
Yeah. Okay, can we move on to the Q&A section?
Oh yeah. Okay, I see two questions from Andrew. Hello, Andrew. Thanks for watching.
Okay, on the topic of strategies of working with others, what do you do when you have a chamber music partner and you need him to play quietly, but he says, I'm already very quiet?
Yeah, well, I know exactly who he's talking about, but I suppose I better not say. But anyway, well, when you have a chamber group, invariably it involves 4 very different personalities. So, in my chamber group that I currently work with, for example, there's all sorts of personalities, from really sort of some feisty character to some very emotional character who says, I'm already very soft, why are you asking me to play softer? Or some very intellectual ones who think about the performance practices and various things. some confrontational ones. So sometimes we just let two of them confront each other, while other will then just talk about other things. So it's a sort of dynamics of different personalities, but it's important in a chamber music group not to let one person or one personality or one instrument dominate. Because if you do that, it won't be a very successful chamber music group, because it's chamber music where the four are equal partners. It's not a violin soloist, for example, being accompanied by three other instruments, or a piano soloist being accompanied by three others. It's not. There might be passages within the music that is, but overall, it's four equal partners. So then, well, one good thing about playing with familiar partners is that then you can tell them, well, shut up, you are too, you're really too loud. I don't care, just play softer, sort of thing. So that's fine.
Okay, also from Andrew. Oh, question 2.
Yeah. Yes.
Now that there will be social distancing for some considerable time, probably months, do you have any ideas as to how performing musicians can get back to concerts and sharing their music with others?
Yeah, I mean, it is in some sense a very lonely time. I suppose pianists don't feel it that much, because pianists will go like, what social distancing? We are always practicing alone anyway. We are never with anybody else. We are always kind of alone at the piano. But well, I suppose in some sense, it is really a kind of something that has changed the world, and we can probably never get back to what we were before. But it is also quite good. I mean, for me personally, my schedule tend to be quite hectic, and it felt really strange because I wasn't traveling around, because usually I'm always somewhere else. I'm never in the same place for more than 2 weeks at a time. But so it is quite it's some time, I think, for us to just kind of sit quietly and think about what we want to do. So with music, there is always a lot of planning one can do. Okay, we can explore, listen. Well, it's some time to listen now. I'm listening much more than I ever was these few weeks. So think about what repertoire you want to learn, discuss that with your other chamber partners, plan out things and so on. So that can be a lot of planning that one can do. And I mean, with Zoom, with all sorts of platforms, digital platform, you can actually record yourself, put it together. I mean, I was looking at a choir of like, I can't remember how many, more than 100 or 200 people singing together, kind of putting them together. So you can do that nowadays. It's still not a replacement for actually being physically in the same space, of course, but it's not a complete cutoff nowadays. So I must, thank goodness for technology and the internet.
Amen.
Yes.
Okay, next question from Joanna. Okay, she'd like to ask for your opinion on a child about 7 to 9 years old playing in a piano concerto. Will it be difficult for the child to be able to project the sound through the whole hall with the orchestra while the child is playing from the back of the hall?
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course, with a young child, physically, because they are so small, then the sound, the volume that they can produce would be limited in some sense. But I mean, depending on what sort of repertoire, there are some sort of concertos in some sense designed for younger people, people to play, younger pianists. So they tend to be slightly more lightweight in some sense, and the orchestration is also lighter, more transparent. So well-written ones doesn't have to be a huge sort of sound, or even some of the early Mozart ones are very well written. So you don't need to produce huge, big romantic swathes of sound to be able to project. So it really depends on how you work with the orchestra. If the conductor is sensitive, then he will work with what this young pianist is producing to try to match it. So it's more a sort of relative thing, rather than the orchestra being always so loud and you always have to be that much louder. So I mean, if you choose the repertoire enough and if you work with a sensitive enough conductor, I think it is not a problem with very young child.
I see. Okay. Okay, the next question. What is your favorite piano concerto?
Oh, well, there's so many. Well, I suppose I don't know whether it's because it's played so much and so on. So I wouldn't go for the usual Tchaikovsky or Rack 2 or whatever. I actually like both the Brahms concerto very
Brahms.
much. Yeah, number one and number two, and some of the Beethovens, of course. If you ask me to name one, yeah, I possibly Brahms second.
Brahms,
I think.
Brahms it is.
Yeah.
Okay, there's another question from also anonymous. Do you think it is important for maestros and professional musicians to encourage, inspire, and help students through volunteer teachings and workshops?
Yes, yes, I think so.
Of course.
Well, like in the setting of like JPO or any other community orchestras, it would be good, of course, to have a professional to come in to do some work with them, whether it's to lead the sectionals or just to coach, even individual coaching for the kids and so on. So it is good to bring them in to help inspire kids, inspire younger musicians and so on. So yeah, I think it's very important. But obviously, you can't expect a professional to devote full time to it for free.
Of course.
That is not practical. But yeah, and I think most musicians you speak to would be very willing to work with youth orchestra, with young orchestra, because they know how important it is to have this sort of thing. And we are lucky now. I mean, in KK you have Jesselton Orchestra, and over here there are a few youth and community orchestras, Penang as well. As I said, when I was growing up, there was hardly any. And like what I was saying, the first time I heard a live orchestra was when I was playing a concerto with them. So we are much more lucky nowadays.
Yeah, true. Okay, speaking about KK, Cheong Kok An asked, any future performance in KK?
Well, Kok An, if you invite me, I would love to come. after all this COVID-19 and MCO, of course.
Yeah, true.
I mean, I think at some point I used to go to KK quite a lot, and some friends were asking, is KK my second home? I mean, KK is such a beautiful place.
Wow.
So yeah, I would love to come back and play something with JPO at some point.
Okay, are there any more questions? Okay, since there are none so far, let me ask one. Okay, I've written some questions. Okay. Why is it hard for this current generation to enjoy classical music?
Well, I don't know whether it's really hard, but I suppose sometimes one needs to help dispel the notion that classical is for old and stuffy old people. Some people also, some members of the public also think that classical music is boring, or you listen to classical music when you want to relax or when you want to sleep, that sort of thing. So everybody just seems to know, a lot of the public anyway, just seems to know pieces like Pachelbel canon, that sort of thing, as classical music. But so it's really to sort of open them up to let them discover that there's actually a lot more different styles and so on. I think a good starting place is a lot of things like film soundtrack. I mean, nowadays, a lot of film soundtrack uses a lot of either classical or classical-like sort of music. I mean, all the Star Wars, there's nothing original about Star Wars music. Well, sorry, John Williams, but I mean, you can pick bits of it. This is from Holt's Planets, that's from Khachaturian, this is from Mussorgsky, that sort of thing. So it is in the style of a lot of late Romantic or early 20th century music. So I think a lot of younger people then can relate to all this if they are kind of perhaps if you're familiar with some soundtrack, and then you kind of introduce what's next. That sounds like it.
Okay, the next question is from YouTube Live. This is from KV
Okay.
Yap. Okay. Hi,
Right.
Uncle Lou. What kind of new
Oh, yeah.
composition do you think you would like to play?
New composition. Hello, nephew Yap. New. Well, it depends on how new. I mean, I'm not a sort of pop, jazz sort of pianist, and neither do I do a lot of contemporary music. I do some, but not a lot. So I can't say I've played any really modern piano concertos. I'm trying to think. Probably the most modern ones would be just like Shostakovich or Prokofiev, that sort of thing. Or well, unless you count Yellow River, which I've done quite a few times, in KK as well.
Oh,
Actually twice in KK. So yeah, I suppose that is one of the newest ones. So, but if there are some new pianistic and attractive, interesting new music, yeah, I would love to play them. But I mean, solo music I have done, I have explored, and there are some really good modern sort of music, modern classical. I mean,
okay. There's an anonymous person.
mm-hmm.
Can you give advice or suggestions for me to play back my piano? I have stopped playing more than 10 years ago.
Okay. Well, if you've stopped playing for more than 10 years, you probably the fingers are a little bit rusty in some sense. But the good thing is you don't have to deal with exams and so on. I mean, that is one of the things that I think Asians are too obsessed with,
Yeah.
taking exams and so on. So that can be quite off-putting, and I think that's why some people get put off by classical, because they think it's just playing scales and having to go for the grade ones up to grade 8. So well, after having stopped for some time, then you need to look for music that you would like to play. Whether, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's classical or easy listening stuff or new age stuff or whatever, and just slowly work from there. Technically, you might need to sort of work at getting back some flexibility and so on. So it might be an idea, if you find that technically you have some issues, to look for a teacher who can guide you, but making it clear that you are not wanting to do this to take another exam unless you want to, but just to kind of rediscover the joy of playing. So just choose music or get the teacher choose music that you like to learn.
Okay. Okay. Next question.
Right.
Let's see.
Okay,
what is your definition of good music? Is it only classical?
No, actually, good music is anything that I find interesting. So I actually do. I don't know why, but a lot of people think that classical musicians only listen to classical music, which is very strange. But no,
Yeah.
I mean, I listen. I mean, I can't say I've ever been a big fan of any one particular pop singer or pop group, but I do listen to some pop. I listen to, I mean, even some local pop. I even jazz. I kind of like lighter sort of jazz. I can't say I'm a big fan of slightly more difficult ones like bebop or free jazz, that sort of thing. But I like big band and that sort of thing. So I think nowadays you can't just limit yourself to one style and one genre. A lot of, even now, the more modern classical composers get inspired by, for example, jazz music or pop music, all sorts of things. So I think one needs to be open-minded enough to just listen out. So I could listen to something by a pop singer and say, oh, that's a really good song, or I could listen to something and say, oh no, I can't stand it. There's a certain piece that a lot of people play in music festivals called "Kiss the Rain." I don't know whether you know it. So that's that's kind of the Pachelbel canon of of the day, isn't it? It's basically made out of the few chords. So after some time, I find that a little bit repetitive. But then there is a lot of other music which is good. And I love musicals. My wife and I, whenever we get a chance, if we go overseas, we do actually go to see a lot of musicals. So yeah, I think any sort of style would have good music as well as not so good music.
Of course,
as long as it's good.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, again, good is also defined sometimes by your personal taste.
Yes, of course. Okay, moving on. This is by Theophilus Tan. How would you advise for us as musicians to raise up the awareness of classical music? Should the repertoire be more fitting to the regular audience so that they can understand and fit in?
Yeah, well, I think you can do both really. It's quite nice to have something familiar or something old, something new in that sense. Something familiar. For example, whenever an orchestra programs in some film music, it will attract a lot of people. But within that same concert, if you can also then include something that has a connection or that sounds similar to that, or another, sort of classical symphony and so on, then the person who is attracted to go to the concert might in turn enjoy the other piece. So I think one needs to start with something that probably they know, and then introduce on to them other things. So I think that's quite good. And also nowadays, I think a lot of people find classical a little bit daunting because it can be really long. If you listen to a Bruckner or Mahler symphony, it's like 1.5 hours of non-stop music. I mean, I must say some of them I'm not a big fan of either. But I think nowadays, we do it with my chamber music group. We talk to the audience quite a lot. So if there's a sort of connection, if you talk to the audience, introduce the music, talk a little bit about music, then or even talk to them about what to listen for, what's so special about this piece, I think then the audience can appreciate it a little bit more. I think we all can we all can actually appreciate all sorts of works of art a little bit more if we know a little bit more about it. I mean, if you just show me a painting, then I look at it and decide, okay, I quite like this, I don't quite like this. But if you have somebody explaining to me the technique behind it, what's the inspiration behind it, then I think I would appreciate it a little bit more. So I think this sort of communication with the audience is important, and I think it's very helpful. I mean, most of the time, when I talk to members of the audience, they do tell me that they appreciate that we actually talk to them before we perform.
Oh, yeah. Okay. The next question from Anonymous. What is your view on playing by hand or memory? Is it important to have that skill?
Well, unfortunately for pianists, it's become a trend to actually play from memory. It wasn't always the case. I think it's probably very possibly Franz Liszt or somebody who started playing from memory, and it became a trend. But nowadays, there are even younger pianists who actually use a score or use an iPad. I mean, just a few months ago, I was at a concert in KL, and there was a Russian pianist, and he was actually using a tiny iPad throughout the performances. So I think it's kind of getting out of that a little bit. I don't think it should. Well, I for sure don't judge a performance based on whether they memorize it or not. So, of course, it is I think a strength to have if you have a good memory and you can memorize all your pieces. But I don't think that's a necessary requirement nowadays. And particularly if you play chamber music, hardly anybody memorizes when you play chamber music. It's more to do with most of the time people use the music.
Okay, next question. This is Thomas Link's ex-student from Cebu.
Okay, I probably have met you. Hello.
It's Chris Ye. He has been
Okay.
teaching music for the past 8 years after graduating from UCSI.
Okay.
Any ideas or approach in nurturing the interest and appreciation for classical music among our small community?
Well, within the community, if you could, I suppose, can have some sort of activity where you can have some gatherings and some sort of music appreciation. I mean, if you don't quite make it quite so formal, but if you know everybody can sit down and either watch a video of something, some or of some famous performer or some famous orchestra, but have somebody talk again. Back to what I was talking about, talking to the audience. I think if there's a little bit more explanation behind it, I think people will tend to appreciate it a little bit more. And if you can gather some parents to bring their kids and the parents themselves to come to be part of it all, I think then in turn the parents, I think it will kind of grow a little bit better, a bit quicker with the parents' support. So I think, yeah, so
Okay.
communicating and just kind of basically, not to say teaching the community, but just kind of letting them discover and explaining it, communicate a little bit more to them about classical music when doing all this.
Okay. Also from Anonymous, which is harder for you to perform? Music in slow or fast tempo if technique is not an issue?
I can tell you what sort of music is more difficult to memorize for me. Fast music is easier to memorize because there is this muscular movement already. Slow music, if you are not focused, you can lose track quite easily in that sense.
Yep.
And in some sense, slow music is more difficult because it actually does need more more focus, and it actually does need more control. It's actually, if your technique is good enough, brilliant fast music is not that hard to bring off, but slower music is harder in the sense to control.
Okay. What are your thoughts on incorporating avant-garde music in your concert repertoire?
Like what I was saying, I think it's quite good to have something new, something old in a program. So to have a sort of variety, I think a whole concert of completely avant-garde music might put off a lot of audience. But if you include one or two composers within a sort of more conventional one, then audience might hear it and think, oh, actually, I quite like that. So I think that's a better way to introduce avant-garde music to the audience. So I would just include them, but not as a whole big chunk. Bite size I think works better.
Okay, next question from YouTube. This is Liang Seng. Hello, have you played Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue and his piano concerto?
Hello. Yes, I actually have. I'm trying to think how many times I've played it twice. I think I've played it twice. Once with because this is there are actually two arrangements for it. So once with just a wind band actually, and then once with a sort of orchestra. It is great fun. It is a great piece, and his piano concerto is a great piece too. In fact, one of my students actually is learning it and played it this semester at UCSI. That's a fun piece. Not as well known as the Rhapsody in Blue, but it is a really good piece as well.
Okay. Given your vast experience in performing, do you still get nervous? And how do you tackle that nervousness if you do?
I think it's important for all musicians, all young musicians, to realize that sorry, the nerves will never ever go away. So yes, I still do get nervous. And I think if one day I don't feel nervous when I go up to play, I think I would be rather worried because that probably is a sign of boredom with what I'm doing already. So it's not a good sign, and I don't think the performance will be that great. So you do need that kind of nerves to give yourself that sort of energy boost. And so it's a case of knowing yourself. What do you tend to do when you're nervous? Do you play faster than usual? Do you tend to hold your breath, or do you get tense up and physically somewhere? So it's more to do with learning to know your own responses through the many times that you perform, and kind of working with it. And with the nerves, as I said, comes extra adrenaline, extra energy, extra sensitivity in your hearing as well, in your responses. So make it work to your advantage by knowing yourself and how your response is. But yes, I still get nervous.
Okay. Also from Liang Seng, do you have a favorite pianist? There are some examples given here. Murray Perahia, Andras Schiff, and Yu Jia Wang. Do you have any favorite pianists?
I have many, I suppose. I probably can't say one, but Murray Perahia is definitely one. Andras Schiff as well, whom I've always admired since I've heard him live in London many times. Martha Argerich, Christian Zimmermann. Yeah, somehow I'm naming all these slightly older pianists, but I must say some of what Yu Jia Wang does is quite spectacular. Yeah.
Okay, are there no questions so far? Okay, let me continue with my personal ones. Okay.
All right.
Assuming, it's not assuming, you have traveled all around the world, isn't it?
Well, not quite all, but yeah, quite a few places, yes.
Which country's musical culture impresses you the most?
Well, probably England. Well, England in the sense that I was lucky I was living in London. So in the sense that, you can basically in 1 month go to a concert, a play, an event, or a musical every single day and not having to repeat it, because so much goes on all the time. And also it's one of the center where some of the world's great go to perform. You get all sorts of cultural events there. So in that sense, yes. Yeah, I also lived for a time in Italy, and I must say, the Italians are very, very musical. So the man in the street will know the famous opera arias by Puccini, that sort of thing. So the awareness by the public is a lot more in that sense.
Okay, next question.
Yep.
By Mr. Kok An. In your opinion, which piano is the best in the world?
Oh, wow. Are you going to buy one in KK and invite me to go play? Well, I suppose Steinway in the sense is the sort of gold standard.
Of course.
But, I have played on extremely good Steinway. I have also played on not very inspiring Steinways. So it depends. Another one of my favorite is Fazioli. I was in, one of the listeners' nephew, you have to remember, we were in Shanghai and at the piano at the Shanghai Music Fair, and we came across Faziolis, and I played on their concert grand, and the colors are incredible coming out from the instrument. But having said that, Faziolis, I played on probably about 4 or 5 different ones. The quality and the characters vary a lot more than Steinways. In some sense, when you get a fairly new concert grand Steinway, a lot of it is what you expect. With the Fazioli, sometimes you don't know what you're going to expect. You don't know what you're going to get in that sense. But yeah, I would say, probably these 2 instruments.
Okay.
So, Kok An, get ready a Steinway or Fazioli for me. Okay.
Okay, next question. So as a pianist, besides teaching, performing as a soloist, or playing in chamber music, is there anything else a pianist can do?
Well, I think nowadays one can branch out into a lot of different things. You don't just you have to become a piano teacher, churning out students, making them pass exams after exams nowadays. But I mean, my own experience is that I after coming back from Europe, started teaching. I then taught in university. I taught a little bit of classes and so on. And then I also got involved very much with music exam boards like APRSM. Started doing a lot of presentation for them in seminars and all that. So I enjoyed it quite a lot. Well, that entails a lot of travel, but it's also quite interesting because then I get to meet a lot of different music teachers from in different countries. Can be from here, Singapore, Indonesia, Hong Kong, China, Dubai, India.
Wow.
So it's quite interesting to talk to all these teachers, to see what are the differences, and also more interestingly to see, wherever in the world, you also get the same sort of ideas, same sort of people, same sort of personalities, really. So yeah, that is quite interesting. So I think one mustn't limit yourself to think that, okay, if I go and do a music degree, I will come out, I will open a music school and that sort of thing. There are a lot of different things one could do, one can do nowadays.
Just now you mentioned talking to people of other nationalities.
Mm.
Is there any chance you have picked up any foreign language, or are you
Uh,
multilinguistic?
well, I lived in Italy for almost a year, and at that time, I could kind of get by, walking on the street, talking to people. I can't hold a serious deep conversation in Italian, but I can kind of get by. I've forgotten quite a
Wow.
lot of it actually. Yeah, I can kind of suss out the meaning if I read it, but the talking is very rusty nowadays. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it is
Uh,
interesting as a musician listening to different languages and the different sort of musical sounds it makes, really. I
oh,
must say, Italian is a very, very musical language.
okay. What advice would you give to an aspiring pianist?
Well, I think one of the things, if you are a sort of aspiring pianist, uh, you have to learn not just to become a solo pianist, you have to learn about teaching. I mean, let's face it, how many of us are going to be like Yuja Wang or Lang Lang who goes around the world performing? So teaching is going to be a big part of it. Also, working with other people and so on. So don't just concentrate on solo stuff. So I think working with other musicians, you learn a lot. Uh, One of the most important things, as I was saying earlier today, was about discussing music, thinking more about music in terms of what you want to do with the interpretation and so on. So I think, especially here, we are so used to just sitting there and trying to become an imitation of our teacher. Our teacher says, do this here, and we try to just play exactly like what they do. So it's changing a little bit now, but it didn't used to be like that. And we are just all being told what to do. So you need to learn to think a little bit more. And I think working with other musicians, with other instrumentalists, one learns a lot. You also learn about how to play the piano from uh, listening to a violinist or listening to a clarinetist or listening to a singer or working with a singer. So yeah, I mean, keep your options open. Don't just concentrate on learning up 20 piano concertos because you
okay.
think you want to go around the world just performing solo. So there's a lot of things uh, to learn apart from just the solo stuff.
Okay, thank you. Is there an advantage for a pianist to be a voice coach?
Um, a voice coach for a singer, I suppose this person means. Well, that's a
Yeah, I
very
guess so.
specialized sort of work, really. I mean, uh, like if you work a lot with the opera company and all that, you are then called a repetitor. So I work with voice. I work with singers quite a lot. In fact, I think you had Cecilia Yap on one of the days, and I work with her quite a lot. But I wouldn't say that I'm anywhere near a sort of vocal coach. But having said that, working with a singer very often, then uh, a lot of singers would ask me what I feel about the music and how I think it should go and that sort of thing. So one will also have a lot of input when playing with a singer. But if you like languages, if you want to become a voice coach, yeah, you can be a very good pianist, accompanist, but at the same time, you also need to learn a few languages. So linguistic skills is very important. And
Yep.
I think ideally, then you also take up some voice lessons so that you know how singing feels like.
Okay, next question by Andrew Filner again.
All right.
What do you miss the most about music making while in this MCO?
Well, I suppose music makings with friends and well,
Yeah.
rehearsing with you, Andrew. But yeah, but I can still practice a lot of my solo stuff. I can practice chamber music, but just my own part. But yeah, the interaction with another musician in the same physical space, I think that's what I miss about it. And also, well, uh, I'm lucky that in my chamber music group, we are all quite good friends as well. So we also hang out apart from just rehearsing. So yeah, I do
Oh,
miss that.
okay, from Anonymous, what is the best way to learn the different interpretations of music? Can you recommend how to go about it?
Well, I think in interpretation learns from a lot of listening, and after that uh, some thinking on your own. The thing is, all this music, there are a lot of different ways to interpret it, but you have to also listen to a lot of different interpretation to know whether you like this way or that way, or you like this person's idea, or if it's also good to hear something and decide, okay, I don't like this interpretation. Then you think about why and how, and then you think about how you would go about it. So yes, in the early stages, I suppose we do at some point, yeah, to imitate a little bit. Our teachers tell us, okay, this is how you play this phrase. Then we imitate a little bit. Then you listen to other people play other recordings and so on. Then you decide, okay, there are so many different ways. Then you can think about a way that you find convincing, or you think you can make convincing, a convincing case of, in that sense. Yeah, so it's a lot of listening to different sort of styles and interpretation, and then thinking and deciding something on your own.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay, next question by Susan. Hi, since you have traveled well, besides classical music, what other music in terms of culture or country do you like?
Besides classical music, well, I quite like, as I said, musicals. So I was lucky in London, and there were, is the West End has so many different musicals going on. So I love going to all the sort of different ones. Italy, again, as I say, is a very musical people, Italians, and yeah, the sort of they will break into their sort of Neapolitan songs and all that. So those are really sort of full-blooded, passionate songs. So that is really quite something to hear and see as well, something to experience. But again, one of the most fun musical things I witnessed was on a boat in out in Raja Ampat, because I'm quite an avid diver, scuba diver, as Yap Ning will tell you. And there was one
Wow.
we went to Raja Ampat, which is kind of like near towards Papua New Guinea. on the boat, so we had a few dive masters there. At the end of the trip, everybody was just on the boat, and these few Indonesian kids, really, they were just in their 20s. So they got together, and then they started just singing all sorts of songs, English songs, Indonesian songs, Malay songs, Chinese songs, and they had a broken guitar. One of them were using some chopsticks to be the drums and the percussion and all that. And I must say, they were really great. I mean, the sort of level of music making is actually quite high, and it is actually quite prevalent in Indonesia. So that was quite something.
Okay, thank you. Next question by Kok An again. Could you share again why is it not suitable to perform Chopin's Scherzo with baby grand 5 meter? In 2007, you told me this would murder my baby grand.
Yes, Kok An is very protective of his little baby there. Did I play the Scherzo? I can't even remember. Maybe I didn't. Well, some of these sort of romantic pieces, they really do need a great big range of sound and also a very rich sonority. So unfortunately, with the 5-foot baby grand, I think it's all right for a living room, but the bass will never be quite rich enough in that sense. So if you're on stage in a space for 200-300 people, it is going to sound a little bit tinny. It's kind of like listening to an orchestral piece on your phone compared to listening to an orchestral piece on your hi-fi set with floor standard speakers, in that sense. So anyway, Kok An, yes, get ready the Fagioli Grand for me next time.
Okay, I'm so sorry, but this is the last question. After that, Mr. Lu will can you stay back for a while and to answer those unanswered ones?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you so much for allocating some of your time to take part in this broadcast.
Yeah, it's been lovely talking to you.
And with your help all these years. It's been a pleasure too.
Well, I hope to return again one day and work with you guys.
As a gesture of appreciation, if you ever want to perform in KK, it is our pleasure to lend a helping hand.
Thank you very much.
Please come to KK.
Yes, I love to.
Okay. Dear audience, due to time constraints, we will be ending now. Our JPO family program will be broadcasting every night until further notice. Do tune in tomorrow night as we will be having Mr. Charles Wong as our guest speaker.
Please check for the link at our Jesselton Philharmonic Orchestra Facebook page to tune in. And also, if you want to watch the program again, you can go to our JPO Media channel on YouTube. Also, we have a new Insta page, which is at JPO Media, no caps, no spaces. Do give it a follow.
Okay, you all have been great. Thank you for all those questions, and I hope you got the answer you wanted. For those awaiting your answer, I think Andrew, please stay.
Yeah,
Mr. Lu will.
I will type something.
Okay, Mr. Lu will answer your questions in writing. Okay, before we end, Gabriel will lead a prayer to end tonight's program. Let's join our hearts and pray in whatever faith you believe in for this pandemic. Gabriel? Okay,
let us pray. Father Lord God, thank you for joining us together, creating such a wonderful bond between us in this webinar. Thank you for bringing us together through music, Lord.
Amen.
Thank you for letting us share our experiences and listen to each other, even in these perilous times, Lord. And I hope that our faith will go on and your mercy will shine through, Lord. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Lu. You have been an amazing guest.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Okay, we will be leaving now.
Stay safe, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, stay safe, everyone.
Wash your hands.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.